Hello, everybody. I'm Anoop. I'm the Director of Global Data Center Services for Twitter. I've been here for about 3 years now. And prior to that, I used to manage the global deployments group at Google. I see a lot of friends here. So I have a lot of limitations on the data I could share with you because of contracts, because of communication policies. So I probably won't be able to answer why, where, when, those kind of questions specifically. But I will leave quite a lot of time at the end of the presentation, so you can ask me your use case, and I can apply what I know. All right. So this was a bright day for Twitter, when President Obama announced his victory on Twitter before he did anywhere else. And me personally, most of us at Twitter nowadays, we watch TV with our Twitter client open. And I was amazed to see how this particular tweet not only reached people, but how people were interacting with them. The number of people who retweeted it, who favorited it, it was just ticking up and up and up. And I was a little bit panicked because, you know what? That's a lot of traffic. But nothing happened, and we don't expect anything to go wrong. We are at a good place now. But what has happened is, Twitter is slowly changing the world, and people are coming to Twitter for real-time news before anything else. And I take that line from our Twitter website, which is one easiest way to explain Twitter is the fastest, simplest way to stay close to everything you care about. Some status updates. So our world record right now is about 33,000 tweets per second. Now you take that, if that was a sustained tweet rate, that's 2 million per hour, 2 million per minute, 120 million tweets per hour, about 3 billion tweets a day. All right? We have over 200 million active users. Those are people who we have some methodology on how we calculate it. It's not just a user who creates and abandons it. These are people who join Twitter and engage in some consistent fashion. About 1 billion tweets are made every 2.5 days. We are heavy on mobile users. A lot of users use Twitter primarily on their mobile client. A lot of people view our tweets too. It's the same analogy somebody explained to me when I joined Twitter. I don't have a lot to say. I don't have a lot to announce. And they said, think about books. Not a lot of people write books, but a lot of people read books. So same thing. There's about 400 million people who actually visit our site and consume the data, even though they don't tweet themselves or something like that. And like any other service, there's a huge set of users outside US, in Europe, in Asia, and in Latin America. So there are a lot of core drivers that I could show on how quickly we have scaled over time. So I joined somewhere around that 65 million daily tweets per day sometime in 2010. And you see, just as soon as I joined, because of me, it just went up, right? But it is everything I expected, and it has been a very wild but very interesting ride so far. It's not just the tweets per day. Tweet is just a write operation. What our service is much more. How many people view it, how many trends we display. We are rich media heavy now. There's a lot of photos that's being shared on Twitter. We recently launched the application called Wine, short videos, and it's the number one on the Apple Store. We launched music, so there's so many services that makes the Twitter experience better, and number of tweets is just one indicator. My VP, Mazen, he recently posted a blog, and he said, what do we do? And specifically his team. So I'm part of his team, which is infrastructure operations. We are the backbone of Twitter infrastructure. There's multiple teams, sub-teams within us. We do the planning. We do the performance engineering. We project the demand. We find the data centers, design, deploy them. We have network engineering. We have security. We have command centers. What's most important to us? I mean, be reliable, be available 24/7, and scale, right? And to like make Twitter accessible to everybody in the world. So that's what the mission of the team is, and we are hard working at it. All right, so everybody asks the same questions, right? Whenever somebody has a success story and has grown or scaled very fast to like large numbers. How many data centers do you need? What kind of technology do we use? And where do we put it? All right, so let's get to the question number one. How many is too little? How many is too many? Let's assume, I'm just using simple math here. Let's assume I have a data center and my net demand is 1,000 machines. Now remember that 1,000 machines is not just what you need average, it's what you need, plus you need to have some surplus for peak and spares and so on and so forth. Now, it will be suicidal to go with a 1 DC approach if you are a large service which is expected to be up and running 24/7 all year. So first thing, what do? You go 2 DC. You need 1,000 servers there too, because if DC1 fails, DC2 should take the load, right? So just by adding a redundancy, one single data center, you have doubled your capital cost and operating costs, right? So now you say, I mean, can I continue like this forever? You could. It's going to be costly. You go add a third data center. Now you can have 500, 500, 500, 3 data centers. One fails, you still have your 1,000 up. And that's a simple math you can do. This is done in operations research all the time. We are not the only people who have the problem, right? So I just wanted to like convert that into some numbers and show it to you. And I have used some indicative costs. Now, these are not like direct Twitter numbers, right? So I just said nominal server cost $2,500. And to operate it for 4 years, it costs another $2,500. So that's basically your data center rent and power and the operating overheads. So that's $5,000 per server. Now, every time you put a new data center, there is some components that you need to add to that data center because it's a different location or a different data center. Now, we need to be very careful that we don't like say, okay, for every 1,000 machines, we need a core switch. So for the second 1,000 machine, I need a core switch. That's not an additional cost. I'm talking about, let's say, I need an office, right? In one data center, you would have just needed one office. In this case, you need 2, or an edge router, or a team of people, or the backbone fiber that you need to run to data center. So for just modeling purposes, I assumed it's $5 million per data center, which is the overhead. Now, you just use that same math, and then I have like shown like various demands here. So assume your base demand is 1,000 machines, or 10,000, or 25,000, or 50, or 100. I just showed you the scale. And if you can see, right, if it's just 10,000 servers, you're not going to win that game by adding way too many data centers, because the overhead far outweighs the reduction in capital cost because of diversity. But as you keep going higher and higher when your base demand is going up, you will see that the cost compared to like a 2 DC, I'm not even going to look at the 1 DC, because really, if you have 100,000 servers, you shouldn't be in one data center. But like you should see the savings increase. I just charted it out. And if you see, the higher the demand, the more number of data centers, you will see the diminishing returns over some period of time. And for different curves, it's different. For the lower demand, 2 to 3 data centers, and then your returns are diminishing, because obviously the overheads are outweighing the advantages. All right, so that's the deal with data centers. That's the deal with how many you need. The higher the demand, you are better off having multiple data centers. How many, it's a function of modeling. And when you have multiple data centers, what do? You minimize risk. I mean, obviously, you get out of the common environmental hazard zone or log to a power grid and so on and so forth. On the other hand, you maximize your opportunities. You could tap into a better climatic condition. You could tap into a better labor pool. You could tap into better cost, You could offset your cost against revenue. Let's say you make $1 billion in Europe. You want place your expenses there too, so you could offset it. There are multiple advantages like that. So use it wisely, and you'll come on top of it. All right. Okay, so what good is a DC conference without arguing about cloud and hosting and build to suit, right? So, I mean, this is my cursory obligation to you, right? I mean, we all know the numbers here, right? There is cloud. We can always do wholesale colos. We can always build to suit. And it's not really a clear, like, subdivisions or something. It's actually hybrid. It's technology is different. The business aspects to it is different. But it's the same. I mean, if it's a cloud, you're not buying your servers, you're leasing it. It's the minimal, right? I mean, if you're a small company, you can't afford to, like, buy servers, get the credit rating. You don't know exactly what you want, right? I mean, the CapEx is extremely low. The OpEx, obviously, I mean, these companies are doing it for profit. So they are doing exactly what a wholesale, if you're in a wholesale colo or built to suit, and they are doing it efficiently, and then they are putting a profit on top of it. So you have to pay the man the price for getting the features, but the barriers of entry is very low, right? Commitment is very low in cloud. If you build to suit, if you create your own data center, which is like very custom, and you need, it will only work for specific hardware, you're stuck with it, right? So you better know what you're getting into. Customization, right? So in a cloud, you get what they have to offer, right? I mean, there's some level of customizations you can get, but what's on the menu is what you could order, right? Versus when you go to a wholesale colo, I mean, now you're leasing the space and putting your own servers, so you have better control over things. But then again, right? I mean, a wholesale colo, the whole concept is co-located, right? So it's created for multiple people to come in, so they use standards. And when you try to standardize across a large number of people, there is efficiencies that's lost or not specifically applicable to you. And if you make your own, obviously it can be exactly what you want. Deploy times are much easier on cloud. So these are not things you have not seen before, but I just had to iterate it. Right? So the magical cloud, the wholesale colo, or the build to suit, all roads lead to Rome. You know, I mean, it's a function of what your demand is. It's a function of where your company is at this point of time. And it's not like you always have to sequentially go through one through the other. You keep going back and forth. If Twitter acquires a company, we probably will go back to some Amazon. We'll have some services there, and then we might migrate it. We may not. We might buy a company which has custom hardware which won't fit in a built-to-suit data center, in which case you still need colo. So all of this are feasible. It's basically there is no real one answer or this is how you go about it. The flip side of is like people like you can't blame the screwdriver saying I can't fix the car tire with this, you know. So don't throw one out either. I mean, each of these are very viable solutions, and I don't want to like put one below the other. These are all possibly my partners and future employers, so I need to be careful too. All right, so engineering opportunities, what are we working on? We are working on, like anybody else, 4 different things, right? Number 1, reduce what you need, right? So there's a lot of efficiency lost, both bad hardware design or suboptimal hardware design, and then what you have, how well do you use it? So it's not just us. We don't throw a server out there and say, do whatever you want with it. We partner actively with our engineering teams to say, hey, where is your utilization? Why can't this be 25%? Why can't this be 50%, right? So always the best way, right? I mean, the less you need, that's the best solution out there. 2, reduce redundancy, right? I mean, so we are used to data centers, various standard models, 2N, 2N plus 2, right? An additional generator here as a substation there, some extra cooling here. Think about it. I mean, compare your risk versus reward. If you're a single data center, yeah, don't spare your expense. I mean, you don't want to like buy a Cadillac and not have the insurance, right? So that's pretty much the thing, right? But the more diversity you have, the less your failure domain is, the more resilient your software is. Try to reduce the redundancy. I mean, all of this redundancy is built based on highly improbable risk, at least in data center world. right? So I've seen people move away from a data center saying it's a 1 in 100-year floodplain or something like that. But the probability of that happening is like 1 in 100 years. I mean, you don't even know if that company lasts that long, right? So there are a lot of decisions we make and a lot of precautions we take. So that's one area we are working on. Improve efficiency, obviously. Within given a design, there is highly efficient machines and engineering happening. There's a lot of containment that will like help the mechanical heat exchange issues. There's a lot of economization. Use the climate to your advantage. I've been attending a couple of shows here today using seawater. I mean, all those are like using outside air and various different kinds of economization that's working. So again, I'll be having a Q&A time, so if I can answer, I can, but trust me, there are better experts out there, and we rely on them. And then last but not least, I mean, there are many other areas to do these things, you know. How to do a cable plant better. I mean, I've seen people spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on like wire molded trays and ladder racks and things like that. Do you really need it, or are you doing it because somebody else did that? I mean, you have to constantly keep asking that question and see if there is any areas for improvement. Recently, I spoke to a data center vendor, and he said, I don't have fire suppression in my data center. I said, what do you mean? He said, look, we take the oxygen content down in my air, and then I replace the mass with nitrogen, so there's not enough oxygen for combustion, so this is not a problem. I said, won't your people like suffocate or something? And says, pretty much the same feeling as when you are in Denver or in some high elevated location. So I definitely want to try that out. All right? So there are lots of areas. I mean, at the end of the day, you take your cost, create a pie chart, and you see the distribution. The larger the pie, if you can do something about it, the bigger the impact or the savings, you know, and you have to keep looking. And obviously, when you're a smaller team or growing up, you'll go for the low-hanging fruits. But as you start scaling up and millions become billions of expenses, and like turn every stone upside down and see if there's some opportunity there, you know. All right, so where, right? Where, I'm not going to go over it, trust me. I mean, how to select a data center, where to go about it. There is millions of literature out there, but if you want me to, I can talk about it. So I come to what I came here for, get more people, right? Hiring interns, fresh grads, seasoned professionals. So, and then now I'm going to turn it over to you, and you can ask me questions, what you came for, so. All right, so that was, and I know I'm standing between you and the drink, so go for it. Looks like no hecklers today. Awesome. Yep.
Hi. We hear from server vendors who talk and people who with internet data workloads that if you get too much growth, there's just not going to be enough room, enough power. Do you look at high density servers and low energy servers at all for your future plans?
So good question. I mean, high efficiency servers for sure, right? I mean, I'll take it every day, right? I mean, what's wrong with that, right? High density servers is a function of how you scale. So a rack has some constraints associated with it. So let's assume you are running power whips in this case, or it might be different for a bus bar, right? But let's say we are using a L2130, in which case, based on the NEMA standards, the 80% rating or something, the max you could go up to is, like about 8.6 kW without exceeding the limits, right? So as long as it fits within that limit, right, well and good. If I waste some white space, that's always a good thing. If I grow the rack like 10 feet tall, now I have a problem. I need to hire people from, I don't know, NBA to fix it, right? So that's the only problem. So higher the density, not a problem. Lower the density, yes, I have a problem. Higher the efficiency, no problem. Lower the efficiency, yes, right? There are other things too, like many data centers nowadays use top of the rack architecture, which is like, every machine in a rack is connected to a switch, and that is then like piggybacked onto the core switch, right? So these switches usually come in like 24 ports or 48 ports or 96 sometimes, right? So you don't want a 50 machine rack because now you need an extra tower for 2 machines, right? So there are this kind of like chunks or like scaling constraints or multiples that you go by, right? So white space as a constraint in data center is something I'm seeing less and less and less. So hope that answers it.
Just to give us a sense of your scale and your growth, can you tell us anything like how many new servers you're adding a month, for example, or give us any numbers at all?
Yeah, actually, hopefully that thing is the graph, right? I mean, you can extrapolate it whichever way, take the slope of that, right? So if I remember right, that was pretty linear. So it was 65 million in 2010 and like 400 plus million, assuming we hold that rate, right? So, right? So that being said, I mean, sooner or later we'll hit the limit of human beings in the world. So it's not going to keep growing and exceed the human population, right? So,
there you go. Sure.
Servers, I cannot, sorry. It's tens of thousands at least, let me say that way, right? So.
Thank you. Question in regard to your data centers. I don't know what your level of tier is for your data centers. Would you go with a tier 2 at a 3 nines, or do you go to tier 4 at a 6 nines? What level of infrastructure do you have for your data centers?
I believe you can achieve more than what your recommendation says if you engineer it smart in the first place, okay? So, I mean, the tier ratings built in a lot of factors. But that being said, yes, and that's a function of that graph I showed, right? If it's my first data center, obviously not. If it's my second, again, not, right? Now, when I go to the third and fourth and fifth, now I have the flexibility to like play around a little bit, right? Stratify my services, break saying this 10 services are mission critical. No, these 10 can go down, right? So I will match the SLA or the commitments to my services with the data center. So obviously the answer in the long run is yes, and within the data center itself, you could have multiple tiers. So.
Yes, I would like to know how are you meeting your growth demands? Are you using prefab, modular approach to the modular data centers?
I can't get into that, sorry.
That's a nice try, though.
Right, so.
Further questions?
If you had asked that same question, like, what do you think about modular data centers or prefab, I can answer that.
What do you think about modular data centers?
Right, so smart way to go about it, right? I mean, obviously, if you size a campus or a data center for 50 megawatts, you have a choice of building it day one, or you can design it in such a way that it meets. I mean, I don't know about you can make a 50 megawatt generator if you want, but usually there are industry available, mostly traded UPSs and generators. And if you can kind of pick the suite and design it 2 megawatts or 4 megawatts, keep the plumbing ready, but buy equipment as needed, that's the smartest way to go about it. No questions asked, right? Containers, I have heard some good numbers, right? I don't have direct experience with it. It's a quick and easy way to go about it if you need something really quick, especially if it's hard to construct and things like that. But large scale, I will ask IO, George, or somebody to come and pitch his product, So.
Anub, I have a question. Do you deploy DCIM at Twitter? And if so, what would have been the benefits or challenges to doing that?
So if I say I use DCIM, then I own a data center, right? Right. So no, those. If you can, DCIMs are good, right? That depends upon how much control you have your data center. Obviously, if it's built to suit, you can use it, right? If it's not built to suit, Now we are hoping the vendor uses a DCIM. Now the question is, how do you tie into that DCIM, right? So I'd be interested in how IBM or our friends here before would say that, right? So when the systems traverse owners, right? So ITS is by somebody, DCIM is by somebody, right? And how do you tie these things together? It's a better question for the DCIM manufacturers. But
Anup, hi. This might be an already known answer, but I just like to ask this. Do you diversify your data centers globally?
so the logical answer would be yes, right? So if I have my demand, and then if I can shard it, so that's a very important question. I probably didn't touch upon it. Earlier in my example, I said I have 1,000 servers, and then I can split it into 500 equal chunks across 3, right? That may not be always true. That kind of assumes that your demand is perfectly fluid and can stay anywhere in any sizes, right? That's always not true. Let's say you need 1,000 machines for storage to create a storage volume on which you store data, and you want the same data in 3 different data centers. So first of all, it's not shardable, right? So it's slight diversion from what you exactly asked. So I just wanted to make very clear that like making too many data centers is not always that easy. But that being said, once I have the choice of making data centers, absolutely, right? So if I can geographically diversify it, multiple advantages there. One, latency. Latency is less and more close to the user, so I spend less money in backhauling traffic across the globe, right? I can definitely make use of whatever good things are there about that geography. It could be climatic conditions, better labor pool, financial incentives that a country would love to offer, or tax benefits by offsetting cost against revenue. So yes, so the minute you have the freedom or the economics that support your argument saying have more than 1 or 2 or 3 data centers, then yes, you should maximize that opportunity to diversify it geographically.
I'm curious, how much variability or predictability is there in your demand, and what do you do from an operations management standpoint to prepare for something like a presidential election?
So great question. So there is a lot of variability, but right now when variability gets really tricky, if it is sinusoidal, going up and down and up and down, I have a good variability problem, which is like if they say 10, they always come and ask me for 100, right? So that's a better problem to have, which is like I can use standard tech methodologies, which is bad, right? If I need 1, I make 2 megawatts, right? That never goes wrong as long as your demand doesn't tank, right? So far, lucky me, right? The demand is growing. So what I've been doing is I've been structuring these deals whatever way, if it's built or without giving it up too much, right? Buy more and try to, what is difficult to change is construction times. What's easier to change is the business dynamics, right? So you can always say, you can't just say I need a house tomorrow and expect it to be built tomorrow, but you can always write a contract saying I need this house and I will take it in June, right? So what is easily doable in our industry is to structure the business terms, not the construction. Those are non-negotiable. They take their own lead time. But the other aspect of that is we have an extensive demand planning team. When your large number of when your demand is in like thousands or 10,000s of machines, that is one area you don't skim on. We need to understand every one of our surveys. How does it scale? How has it been historically performing? What do you think it will be? What can be the max possible peak? How do you address those peaks, right? So we have an extensive set of engineers who actually look at the data. We have tons of analytics being done and kind of predict this. And they're a great team because I've been getting pretty decent organic growth. So there is organic growth and inorganic growth. You buy a company, you just suddenly have a step function, right? So those are not predictable. Versus what's predictable, the demand planning team in Twitter has been rocking and giving me solid signals.
Okay, question here in terms of data security and privacy. whether or not that has driven a specific strategy in terms of location as well as equipment types that you may have to equip your data centers with.
So generically, yes, location matters, right? So if that's one of the biggest things, qualitative aspects in our site selection, right? How much guarantee do I have that the government won't invade and take my servers and the data along with it and things like that. So that's big on us. As to equipment security, I'm not really sure what you're trying to address here. Is it like one of this Huawei kind of
No, it's how you go ahead and what kind of equipment planning or location planning in order to comply with some of the data security issues and data security problems, along with securing any kind of privacy requirements that you may be faced with your end user base.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of this. That's not my core strength or domain, right? But I know that we spend extensive amount of human resources and equipment resources to install security at all levels. Network security, security policies, so on and so forth. My colleague Bob Lord, he gives quite a lot of talks for Twitter. He's kind of like a evangelist for security, not just for Twitter. So I highly encourage looking. He's at many conferences. It'll be a better question for him. Sorry about that.
Any further questions? Thank you.
Great, we'll give it up for Anu.
Thank you. I appreciate it, guys.